there is a version of America that almost nobody visits. Almost nobody films, and almost nobody talks about. It sits right in the centre of the continent, holding everything it ever built without a word. Welcome to Minnesota. Indigenous nations shaped this ground long before anyone else arrived, governing trade routes that connected half a continent, quarrying sacred stone with bare hands, carving symbols into ancient rock that match sites hundreds of miles away. Networks that most histories never bothered to tell. Immigrant families carried whole cultures across an ocean and raised them in soil that froze 6 months a year and took back everything it could. A waterfall powered an empire that fed a nation. Whole towns rose from nothing. The cold buried some of them. The rest refused to go. Past the prairies and the farm roads lie volcanic cliffs. Fresh water violent enough to sink ships. Frozen waterfalls. And 1 million acres of roadless forest, where wolves were listening long before anyone arrived. The people here do not ask for attention. They never have. But once you step into it, you begin to understand how much was built on this ground, and how little of it was ever spoken about. Along Minnesota's northern edge, the forest doesn't gradually meet the lake. It just ends, dropping straight into one of the largest bodies of fresh water on the planet. This is Tettegouche State Park, where waterfalls, inland lakes, and sheer volcanic cliffs all share the same stretch of Minnesota's North Shore. Formed from old lava flows, the rock here plunges directly into Lake Superior, which, on stormy days, strikes the cliffs with the same raw force as ocean waves. Rather than appearing one at a time, the park's waterfalls arrive in chains along the same rivers, making every trail feel like a steady progression of reveals. Deeper inside the park, 6 inland lakes sit tucked among the forest, some stocked with northern pike and walleye, bringing just as much life below the surface as above it. When winter arrives, the land transforms completely. Falls freeze into towering walls of ice that climbers scale using axes and crampons. By autumn, the ridgelines ignite in orange and gold, drawing visitors to Shovel Point, where cliffs hang above the blue-grey expanse of Lake Superior. The point itself is a narrow slab of volcanic rock jutting out over the water. With a straight drop on both sides, there's nothing between you and the lake but air. Just up the shoreline, the cliffs get even more serious. Palisade Head rises nearly straight up from the lake's surface, one of the most sheer rock faces along the entire North Shore. From top to water, the drop reaches roughly 200 feet, and climbers have spent decades scaling it, treating the formation as one of the premier cliff faces in the entire Great Lakes region. Reddish-pink rhyolite gives the cliffs their colour, a volcanic rock abundant in silica, feldspar and quartz that stands out sharply against the grey water below. Up close, the surface breaks into towering vertical columns, formed as cooling lava cracked into organised geometric patterns, like enormous stacked tiles. On clear days, Lake Superior stretches so far from the summit that the horizon begins to curve, turning the lake scale from an abstract number into something physically felt. At the waterline, a small black and white bird slips beneath the surface without a splash, the black guillemot, hunting fish and marine worms in the shallows directly below the cliff face. On the water they drift low and slow, like tiny patrol boats, bobbing between rocks and scanning the surface before tipping forward and vanishing. On the rocks, they gather in loose groups, bowing in almost polite greetings, turning chance gatherings into social check-ins that reinforce bonds through calls and posture. Up on the ridge, Bean and Bear Lakes come into view, two teardrop-shaped inland lakes sitting quietly side by side, best seen from the elevated trail above. Here the water is clear and cold, fed only by snowmelt and rain, with no inlets from Lake Superior. Self-contained, like two separate worlds inside the park. With no inlets or outlets, the lakes have formed isolated ecosystems, their fish and plants adapted to conditions found almost nowhere else in the park. Down on the water, something keeps disappearing. A bird surfaces without warning, the red-necked grebe, diving below and staying under far longer in search of food. Below the surface, it moves like a submarine with feathers, folding low, driving itself forward with powerful kicks before vanishing in a single fluid descent. When it reappears, the grebe often swallows its catch in one quick gulp, as if trying to erase any trace of the hunt before attention can settle on it. During courtship, pairs face off across open water, calling loudly before sprinting side by side across the surface, splashing and lifting their chests in a synchronized display. For chicks, adults sometimes deliver softened food and even small bits of feather, which help cushion sharp fragments as digestion begins. As seasons shift, these birds leave calm inland lakes behind, moving toward larger waters where waves are rougher and prey is more abundant. Farther out on that colder, darker expanse, a rare visitor moves beneath the waves, a harbour seal, slipping through fish schools in near silence before surfacing for a quick breath. This animal usually lives in saltwater, so seeing one in Tettegouche is like spotting a shark in a swimming pool. Technically possible, but so rare most Minnesotans never see it. When a seal does reach these waters, it has simply followed a moving feast, tracking fish through connected channels until the freshwater feels good enough to stay for a short while. Its thick blubber works like a built-in winter coat. Smooth fur cuts through icy waves, and long whiskers feel tiny ripples from fish that the seal cannot even see. Most people only catch a fast round head, 2 dark eyes and 1 splash before it disappears again, leaving them arguing later if it was really a seal or just their imagination on a cold day. Away from the cold lake, Nobles County Pioneer Village waits on the prairie, its schoolhouse, saloon and depot kept just as they once were. More than 30 structures were brought here from across the county and arranged side by side. An entire town reconstructed from buildings that originally stood miles apart. Inside the hospital sits an iron lung left on the ward floor, a machine that once breathed for polio patients when their own bodies no longer could. Behind the saloon bar, bottles still line the shelves, glasses remain stacked nearby, and cards rest abandoned at a corner table, as if the room emptied only moments ago. Norwegian, Irish and German settlers all helped shape this village, arriving with different customs but facing the same unforgiving prairie winters. That stubborn sense of community still survives today in Worthington, the nearby town that hosts King Turkey Day every autumn, a celebration famous for its live turkey race. During summer, guided tours and reenactments bring the village back to life, leading visitors through the blacksmith shop, schoolhouse, and other preserved buildings from another century. The prairie shaped one kind of Minnesota, but up on the North Shore, Grand Portage National Monument reveals an even older version where the only highway was water. Carved through forest and rock, the Grand Portage is a 9-mile Ojibwe trail bypassing Pigeon River waterfalls, a route that became one of the continent's key trade corridors. Long before European traders appeared, this passage already functioned as a working artery for moving canoes, goods and people between Lake Superior and the interior. When French and British traders finally arrived, they didn't create a new path. They simply adopted the one already in use. Control of the corridor remained with the Ojibwe, who regulated access and shaped how it functioned, rather than acting as passive guides to outside commerce. Around Grand Portage today, one of Minnesota's most remote communities persists, where the Grand Portage Band of Ojibwe governs its own land and keeps its traditions alive. Just upriver, the Pigeon River drops without warning over the tallest waterfall in the state, right on the line where the United States ends and Canada begins. In spring, so much water slams into the gorge that the mist can soak you on a clear day, and the roar drowns out every voice on the viewing deck. In winter, that same wall of water freezes into jagged sheets of ice, with liquid still rushing behind a solid curtain, like the falls are wearing armour. The spray paints the gorge walls with ice and frost, building strange shapes that locals swear look like faces watching from the rock on the coldest days. For the Ojibwe, this was not just scenery, but a powerful place on a travel route, a marker that said you were stepping between worlds, from lake country into the interior. Another layer of the past sits in the southwest at Jeffers Petroglyphs, where people once used rock as a notebook for beliefs and daily life. Carved into some of the hardest quartzite on Earth, the figures show humans, animals, weapons and strange creatures that still match nothing alive today. Different cultures return to this same patch of rock, adding their own marks to what was already there, and turning it into a layered conversation no one fully understands. Some symbols here match petroglyphs, found hundreds of miles away, suggesting the people who carved them were far more connected and travelled farther than most people imagine. Out in the surrounding forest, a different kind of message moves through the trees. The ruffed grouse drumming its wings so fast the sound seems to come from everywhere at once. That low boom comes entirely from air pressure, created as the bird beats its wings rapidly enough for the sound to travel through the forest floor as much as through the air. The grouse itself is far harder to notice. Feathers patterned so closely to dead leaves and bark that it nearly disappears into the ground beneath it. Throughout the year, it survives on whatever the forest provides, shifting between buds, berries, leaves and insects with the seasons and rarely needing to travel far for food. During winter, small comb-like bristles grow along the sides of its toes, acting like natural snowshoes before disappearing again in spring. Rather than nesting on open ground at night, grouse often roost in trees, relying on stillness, elevation, and camouflage to avoid predators below. A short distance away, the Bluffs part just enough for Lanesboro to fit inside, a town so tucked into the Root River Valley that the land seems to have built the place itself. Downtown is a National Historic District, where brick storefronts, painted facades, and iron details along the main street have barely changed in over a century. Despite its tiny size, Lanesboro supports a full professional repertory theatre, drawing actors and audiences who somehow feel perfectly matched to the quiet valley around them. Across the main street, brightly painted buildings resemble part of the stage itself, each carrying traces of different immigrant families in brick, wood and colour. Flowing through the centre of town, the river pools briefly at the Lanesboro Dam before continuing alongside the Root River State Trail along the valley floor. The Root River winds in tight bends, pressed between tall bluffs and farm fields, so close to town that people measure their days by what the water looks like outside the window. Its current is gentle enough for tubing and kayaking, yet strong enough to move fallen trees, shift gravel bars, and redraw the riverbank after every big rain. Cold underground springs feed the river, keeping the water cool even in summer, this narrow valley one of Minnesota's favourite trout fishing spots. Far north, water spreads into a maze of lakes and portage trails in the Boundary Waters Canoe area wilderness, where roads end and paddles take over. Out here, days pass without power lines or streetlights, leaving only rock, water and forest, connected by narrow channels shaped over time by canoe yokes and passing boots. Navigation is never straightforward. One wrong turn in a tight waterway can lead into an entirely different chain of lakes. People return to this place to do the same simple things each time: carry heavy packs, eat basic camp food, sleep sore on thin pads, and somehow call it their happiest version of vacation. People come here for that difficulty, choosing to carry everything they need and accept whatever weather arrives without complaint. In the quiet, every sound carries: a paddle drip, a branch snap, a distant call, and in the shoreline forest, something rare listens back: the grey wolf. Within the boundary waters, wolf packs move through the trees like shifting shadows, using subtle ear flicks, tail signals and soft vocal cues most people never notice. A single wolf may travel for hours, looping past lakes, game trails, and beaver lodges as if following a route only it can read. Broad padded paws spread weight like natural snowshoes, letting it glide over crusted snow while prey animals struggle and slow beneath them. During hunts, the pack closes ranks, steering deer and moose into errors, dropping pressure on stronger targets and isolating those that fall behind. In territorial clashes, even one experienced wolf can shift the outcome, increasing a pack's odds in direct confrontation. When food runs low, they switch tactics quickly, moving from large prey to scavenging, or smaller animals rather than waiting for ideal conditions. Most paddlers never see a wolf directly, only fresh tracks along portages or sandbars, traces that make the forest feel suddenly aware and watchful. Then, cutting through the still air, comes a wild laugh from the common loon, a bird that sounds like it's telling ghost stories to the whole lake. Up close, it shows a sharp black head, bright red eyes, and a clean checkerboard pattern across its back, giving it an almost formal, perfectly arranged look. That haunting call wobbles and rises in pitch, part laugh and part cry, like a finger drawn along the rim of a glass bottle, carrying far across open water. Below the surface, it moves with surprising power, using its wings like flippers to chase fish in tight, fast turns that feel closer to underwater flight than swimming. During courtship, pairs mirror each other across the water, dipping and surging in sync before rushing forward with wings raised, splashing loudly as they reinforce their bond for the season. At times, a parent will surface near its chicks and call softly, guiding them across open stretches of water in short, careful steps. As seasons shift, these birds leave the boundary waters behind and follow long sky routes toward warmer coasts, trading pine-lined lakes for open salt water. While they vanish into the distance, back in the forest, a different ghost takes over the snow-quiet trails, the rare Canada lynx. This cat moves on huge fur-covered paws that function like natural snowshoes, keeping it balanced on soft snow where most animals would sink. Its ear tufts stand upright like small antennae, breaking up the outline of its head so it disappears into branches and shadow. When hunting snowshoe hares, its long legs and powerful hindquarters enable sudden, spring-loaded bursts through thick snow during short chases. While stalking, it places each paw with near silence, pausing mid-step for long stretches so prey rarely notices its approach. On colder days, it often relies on stillness rather than movement, conserving energy and waiting for a hare to make a single mistake. Frozen lakes and open water crossings do not deter it, as the lynx will traverse ice and swim short channels whenever a route requires it. A dense coat of silver-grey fur insulates the body completely, holding warmth even when temperatures drop far below freezing overnight. Population cycles rise and fall tightly with snowshoe hare numbers. When prey increases, lynx numbers expand, and when it declines, they drop just as quickly. From the paddle-only maze of the boundary waters, the map zooms out to broad blue spaces and busy shorelines inside Voyageurs National Park. Here, water is the road, and locals joke that some kids learn boat controls before bike pedals because cabins, fishing spots, and even a few front doors are reached by motor. On calm days, houseboats drift between pine islands, turning the park into a floating neighbourhood where mornings start with loon calls, coffee, and walleye under the deck. Around Voyageurs, rock ridges rise straight from the water, scarred and polished by old ice sheets that once scraped across northern Minnesota. Between those ridges sit bogs, beaver ponds, and small hidden lakes, so a short walk from shore can feel like stepping into a maze of moss, water, and rock. Even storms have their own drama here, with sudden walls of wind and rain racing across open water so fast that locals read the sky and head in long before visitors think to reel in. As boats thread through tighter channels and around rocky points, the open spaces start to shrink, hinting at smaller lakes and quicker water ahead. At the far end of these narrowing channels, Tettegouche hands off to International Falls, the northern doorway to Canada. This small town wears the title of one of the coldest in the lower United States, where winter air can flip a pan of boiling water into a cloud of ice before it hits the ground. A giant Smokey Bear statue in a city park looks out over traffic and tourists, turning a simple corner of town into an unofficial welcome sign for the whole North Woods region. Many cafes and diners here serve border comfort food, big plates of burgers, walleye, and all-day breakfast for locals and Canadians crossing the bridge hungry from the road. Just outside town, the pavement ends and a tangle of branches begins, home to the American red squirrel, a small, loud spark of energy in the pines. Seen up close, it carries rusty red fur along its back, a white belly, and bright dark eyes with small ear tufts in colder months that make it look even more alert against the forest. Only about 11 to 14 inches long, it stays compact and agile. built for fast climbing and tight turns through dense branches. Within its territory, it behaves as if every trunk belongs to it, firing sharp chirps and rattles at martins, hikers, and anything that disturbs the rhythm of the trees. When alarmed, it doesn't just vanish. It calls out, sending harsh warning notes through the canopy that can freeze movement in birds and other squirrels nearby. Much of its day is spent gathering food, stripping cones and nuts, and preparing for colder months when survival depends entirely on stored reserves. Over time, this effort builds into a massive cone cache, or midden, where it piles harvest after harvest into a single long-term pantry hidden on the forest floor. During feeding runs, it stuffs seeds into its cheeks until its head bulges out dramatically, turning each return trip into a frantic, comical sprint back to safety. Beyond the last ring of pines and the ground drops toward open water, where the trees fall back from Lake Superior and a lone light stands on the cliff. Split Rock Lighthouse. The tower stands on a sheer rock wall over 100 feet above the lake, high enough that ships far offshore could see its beam long before they saw land. Its creamy tan brick and dark brown trim pop hard against the grey cliff and blue water, so even on foggy days the lighthouse looks sharply outlined above the lake. Lake Superior demanded that warning light after one brutal storm wrecked so many ships in one season that builders were ordered to this cliff almost at once. To raise the lighthouse, crews hauled stone, steel, and supplies straight up the cliff with winches, turning each load into a slow, nerve-wracking ride over open water. For many Minnesotans, a drive up the North Shore isn't complete without this stop, the one place where family photos, school trips, and road trip snacks all seem to end up. From this open cliff, the route turns south, trading rock and lake for wooded valleys and underground rivers at Forestville Mystery Cave State Park. Beneath these hills, Mystery Cave stretches into long tunnels and quiet chambers, where dark water moves through passages that never see daylight. In places, thin mineral layers form slowly on the ceiling, building delicate sheets and columns that look carved rather than grown, shaped drop by drop over time. At the surface, sinkholes and sudden depressions hint at what lies below, places where water has quietly dissolved the limestone and left hollow space behind. Instead of focusing on the underground world, visitors move between contrasts. Warm air to cool cave passages, then back into sunlight for hikes, camping, and open valley views. Tucked into one bend of these valleys lies historic Forestville, a small settlement preserved in place with worn storefronts and houses still lined up along a quiet road. When the railroad went elsewhere, people drifted away, and one family slowly bought every shop, home and field until a single owner held the entire town. Step into the general store, and shelves still carry jars, boots, tools, fabric, and tins, all sitting where they were left when the last owner closed the building for good. In the back rooms, old pans, dishes, and handwritten notes hint at farm meals and church suppers, the kind of cooking built around sharing rather than display. The path that begins in mud and moss ends in a new kind of noise. Cascading waterfalls cutting through rock at Gooseberry Falls State Park. There, the Gooseberry River plunges over dark volcanic ledges, transforming a smooth current into churning white water racing toward Lake Superior. In spring melt, the river swells so wide and loud that conversation disappears into the roar, and visitors resort to shouting and laughing just to be heard. On warm days, kids hop across flat stones and splash in the cold shallows, while grandparents linger at the railings, pointing out familiar overlooks from past visits. Many locals treat the park as a ritual stop, walking the trails, snapping bridge photos, then heading out for smoked fish, cheese curds and pie from nearby roadside spots. In winter, the same falls freeze into thick, blue-white curtains, while water still moves behind them, slowly reshaping the ice week by week. This constant motion shapes more than scenery. Downstream, calmer stretches form the fast, clear streams the American dipper depends on, a songbird that hunts by walking underwater. It is a small, round, slate-grey bird with a short tail and bright white eyelids that flash when it blinks, living along rushing water where it perches on midstream rocks and bobs up and down. Dense muscles, a heavy oil coat, and a flap that seals its nostrils let it stay submerged in torrents that would sweep most birds away. Beneath the surface, it walks against the current, gripping stones while water crashes over its back, picking insect larvae off rock with precise pecks. It can drop into the flow and reappear downstream without ever leaving the stream, moving through water as naturally as other birds move through air. Even in winter, it holds these fast, unfrozen channels, singing over the roar while most other birds have already moved on. Just beneath the gravel of that same cold stream, another creature hides in near-total darkness. The brook lamprey, an eel-like fish that lives buried in the stream floor. It looks like a smooth, pale rope with tiny eyes and a round sucker mouth. More strange worm than regular fish. That ring of small teeth looks scary, but here it is, a soft feeder, sipping tiny food particles, drifting past and fine bits trapped in the gravel. Several lampreys often share the same patch of stream bed, bodies weaving through the stones like moving threads while cold water races overhead. With one powerful wriggle, it can vanish deeper into the gravel when danger comes, sliding out of reach of hungry fish or sharp-eyed birds. As an adult, it rises from the stones into open water and simply stops eating, living on stored energy for one last short rush of life. That final push carries it downstream, out of the narrow stream channel and into the wide, wind-hit waters of Lake Superior. This lake holds more fresh water than any other on the planet's surface, so big that storms here can sink ships and carve stories into the local memory. It is so clear in many spots that you can look straight down from a cliff and see rock shapes and old timbers on the bottom, even when they sit far below the waves. Old volcanic ridges lie beneath the surface, shaping currents, gathering fish, and dictating where ice forms and breaks first each year. Storms can drive waves so large they reshape entire shorelines overnight, rolling heavy stones like loose marbles along the beach. Winter transforms the same water into wide ice fields that crack and boom loudly enough to shake lakeside towns awake. Warm air sliding over the cold surface often turns harbours into blank whiteouts of fog, erasing distance and leaving ships to navigate by horn alone. Cliffs and river mouths along the North Shore funnel, migrating birds into dense seasonal highways across the sky. On rare nights, solar storms set the atmosphere alight, with green and purple curtains rippling above the lake and reflecting faintly on the dark water below. Up above the same lake, a different kind of pirate works the air, the parasitic Jaeger, turning robbery into a way of life. Instead of diving for its own fish, it spots a gull or tern with a full beak, then rockets after it, twisting and feinting until the panicked bird drops its catch. With long, pointed wings and a sharp tail, it can outturn and outsprint most birds over Lake Superior, snatching falling fish before they even touch the water. When fish are hard to steal, they switch tactics fast, grabbing small prey from the surface, or even picking through floating scraps like a sky bandit who is not too proud to scavenge. Yet for all the chaos above, one thing stays constant below. The same fish are hunted from beneath by the red-breasted merganser, a sleek diver built for open water pursuit. It rides low on Lake Superior with a spiky crest and thin red bill, like a duck that woke up late and ran straight to breakfast. The bill has fine, saw-like edges along the sides, gripping slippery fish so tightly that even a hard shake cannot set them free. Once it dives, the bird tucks its wings, kicks hard with its feet, and shoots through the cold water after fish that suddenly look much less confident. During breeding season, males perform bold courtship displays, throwing their heads back, puffing their chests and rising upright as they call and flash their red bills to attract females. Families and loose groups often cruise Lake Superior in lines or clusters, diving and surfacing in turn until the water seems to bubble with birds rising and falling. Follow those diving birds towards shore, where waves calm into boats, docks, houses, and a snug bay around the small harbour town of Grand Marais. Squeezed between steep hills and open lake, the town watches entire weather systems roll in while daily life continues almost casually, like the storm is just part of the scenery. Life here shifts between long, quiet winters of ice and snow and a brief, crowded summer when hikers, paddlers and artists fill the same narrow streets. Food becomes a local language, with friendly rivalries over pie slices, smoked fish, and cheese curds, each claiming to hold the true North Shore taste. A compact main street holds galleries, cafes, and gear shops side by side, where paintings, canoes, and climbing equipment share the same short walk. Behind it, narrow roads climb into the trees, where homes settle into the hillside, with views stretching back over harbour and forest. At the water's edge, a breakwater path leads out toward a simple beacon, the Grand Marais Lighthouse, marking the harbour mouth. Built to guide boats into a small, rocky harbour, it gives fishers and cargo a clear path home during rough weather. Its white tower stands out against dark water and grey sky, remaining visible even from far offshore. Plain and boxy in form, the structure prioritises function over decoration, a nod to the practical design of many Great Lakes lights. Reinforced with metal and concrete, it endures heavy waves, freezing spray, and shifting ice year after year. Over time, the lighthouse has moved beyond utility, becoming a local symbol that appears in art, logos, and souvenirs as shorthand for Grand Marais. Beyond this small tower and its boats, the state changes character. Trading bays for a small city wrapped in water, and woods appears, beginning along the lakeside streets of Bemidji. It calls itself the first city on the Mississippi because the river flows right through Lake Bemidji at the edge of downtown, then starts its long trip south. The city sits where roads, rivers and trails meet, acting as both a quiet home base and a launch pad for fishing trips, cabin stays, and drives into tall pine forest. Around town, murals, sculptures, and odd roadside figures surprise at every corner, giving this northern city a playful edge against the straight lines of highway and forest. From this quiet red rock corner of the prairie, the route turns east toward tall bluffs and wide river bends, where the Mississippi Valley opens into the city of Winona. The city sits squeezed between sheer rock and slow water, with cliffs on one side and river backwaters on the other, as if someone carefully slid a town into a crack in the valley. Rail lines, barge channels and highways all run through the same narrow gap, making Winona a long, thin ribbon of buildings threaded between stone and river. On festival days, tents and food stalls line the narrow, flat strip between cliff and water, with live music, passing barges, and bluff views all competing for attention at once. Above it all, one rock tower punches up from the bluff line like a broken tooth over the rooftops, the unmistakable shape of Sugarloaf Bluff. The tooth is what's left of a larger bluff that quarry crews cut down, leaving a lone pillar that now looks so natural, many people forget it was shaped by human hands. From its upper slopes, streets, train tracks, bridges, and river backwaters flatten into a tiny grid, showing in one glance how the whole city has been squeezed into a narrow gap in the valley. From the city setting of Winona, the land rises above it, revealing the full scale of the Mississippi River Valley at Great River Bluffs State Park. At the overlooks, the Mississippi spreads into broad pools and island chains, so wide and calm it feels more like an inland sea than a moving river. Above the water, oak and hickory woods give way to sunny goat prairies, dry slopes where hardy grasses and wildflowers survive in thin, rocky soil. King's Bluff and Queen's Bluff within the park protect rare prairie plants, cliff-dwelling flowers, and old cedar trees seldom found elsewhere in the region. Downriver, the same towering rock walls and sweeping channels guide the route toward another bluff-lined town at Red Wing. Long before factories and logos, this place was called Hupahuduta, meaning Wing of the Wild Swan, a name drawn from the river and surrounding cliffs. When English speakers shortened it to Red Wing, the name spread to boot labels and crock stamps, turning a river town into something found on shelves and kitchen counters. Inside brick buildings near the water, pottery works and boot factories still run kilns and presses rooted in older production methods. These cliffs and this wide reach of the river sit on a natural route that bends north, where the Mississippi finally gives way to steel hulls and cold waves in Duluth's big water harbour. Lake Superior holds so much fresh water that people joke you could flood whole countries with it, and Duluth clings to its edge like a balcony over an inland ocean. Giant ore ships slide through the harbour entrance so close to shore that kids on the pier can feel the rumble in their chests and taste metal in the air. When lake-effect snow rolls in and streets vanish under drifts, locals shrug, pull on heavy boots, and treat it as a green light for skis, sleds, and steaming mugs of coffee. Down at the waterfront, that energy funnels into one tight passage between lake and harbour, where a towering lift bridge at Canal Park rises and falls to let ships slip through. When the horn sounds and the road lifts, people drift to the railings, cheering as giant ore boats glide by so close you feel the engines humming through the boards. On stormy days, calm walkways turn wild in an instant, with Superior throwing walls of spray over anyone daring enough to stand near the edge. Between those blasts of drama, it feels like one long lakeside hangout, kids racing bikes, dogs dragging owners toward the water, and families timing ice cream stops to match ship arrivals. Rising from the heights of Enger Hill, the stone-built Enger Tower stands tall, offering a panoramic gateway to Duluth's sweeping views. Its walls are rough local rock stacked into a narrow hexagon with arched windows and a spiral stair inside, so climbing, it feels more like a castle turret than a city lookout. From the top, you trace the whole shoreline in one slow turn. Harbour, ship canal, lift bridge, hilltop neighbourhoods, and open lake swallowing the horizon. On clear evenings, locals bring friends up here to point out ship beacons, street grids, and canal parks glow far below. A quiet ritual that explains why they chose this lake-facing city. Weddings, family portraits, and late-night pizza run all circle back to this hill, with thermoses of soup and warm boxes of pie shared on the benches, while superior wind cuts through. As the waves of Lake Superior roll toward the shore, they guide the way to the iconic Duluth Harbour North Pier Lighthouse. The tower is short and solid, a white cylinder with a dark cap, built to send one clear signal to ships on the horizon. This is the cut between Wild Lake and Safe Harbour. On wild days, waves slam the concrete pier and wrap the lighthouse in spray, so it briefly vanishes behind a moving wall of water and mist. Quiet evenings flip the scene, with families and dog walkers drifting out along the pier to watch oarboats line up on the lake, all waiting for that small light to call them in. Winter locks everything in ice, glazing railings and coating the lighthouse, a clear sign that people here face harsh weather head-on and still come down to watch the waves. That small lighthouse marks the last bit of city edge before the shore relaxes into long forests, rocky points and quiet water routes that stretch across Superior National Forest. In this maze, dense boreal forest closes in tight, with spruce and pine packed so close that a single gust of wind can sound like waves rolling through the branches. Between the trees, hard rock rises and forces water to twist, dropping into narrow gorges, surprise waterfalls, and long, calm lakes that feel sealed off from the rest of the world. Paddle far enough, and those countless lakes start to feel real as you slip through tiny channels, spotting loons, beavers, and eagles, while barely seeing another human face. People build their lives near this forest because it shapes how they grow up. Kids learn canoe strokes before parking. Weekends mean berry picking on rock outcrops, and weather matters more than calendars. Farther south in this tangle of trees, rock and lakes, calm water starts to tighten into quicker runs, hinting that the stone ahead will no longer let it move gently. Those gathered currents soon speed up and drop, crashing out of the forest as cold, foaming torrents that begin to carve the fast, rocky channel of the Temperance River. Here the water cuts through hard stone, slipping into tight slots and bursting into swirling pools, feeding tales of bottomless potholes that could swallow whole logs and careless boots. For many locals, this river is both a warning and a playground. Families hike slick steps, repeat safety talks, then sit on sun-warmed rocks sharing trail mix and smoked fish after the rush. As the gorge stretches on, the roar lifts and narrows, drawing anyone who follows it deeper into the trees and down to the plunge pool of Caribou Falls. The water forces its way through a tight rock slot before dropping into a cold basin, hidden further in the forest, often surprising first-time visitors who don't expect it so far off the trail. In spring, snowmelt turns the falls into a thundering white curtain, sending spray into the surrounding trees. By late summer, the flow softens into a quieter cascade, giving returning visitors an entirely different view of the same place. Winter freezes the waterfall into blue-white columns of ice, attracting climbers and photographers willing to brave the cold for the shifting light. Beyond the frozen falls, the trail climbs toward higher ground, where the forest opens into long views along the ridges of the Oberg mountain loop. The loop strings together overlooks, each framing a different slice of the same scene. Inland lakes pressed flat below the tree line, and Lake Superior beyond. What catches first-timers off guard is how fast the views shift. One platform shows treetops and mirrored lakes. The next drops straight down a cliff to cold water far below, all on a short loop. In autumn, the trail becomes one of Minnesota's busiest, the mixed forest burning orange, red and gold, with overlooks packed shoulder to shoulder. Locals treat this trail like a personal calendar. Wildflowers in spring, blueberries along the ridge in late summer, snow-dusted pines in winter. From these changing views, the focus moves deeper into the forest, where life spans canopy, ground, and night sky. On quiet mornings before the crowds arrive, the ridge belongs to birds, warblers flickering through birch, ravens tipping on updrafts, and a small voice in the spruce, working without fuss. Where the forest thins and the cold loosens its grip, a very different Minnesota waits. One built around boats, broad bays, and long summer evenings at Lake Minnetonka. The lake is not one clean oval, but a sprawling maze of bays, channels, and islands so irregular that first-time boaters sometimes struggle to find their way back to the dock. Summer fills the water with pontoon boats, kayaks, and old wooden launches, while nearby towns spill outward with farmers' markets, fish fries, and ice cream lines that linger past sunset. Once winter seals the surface, ice shanties appear across the lake, and fishers drill through thick ice for walleye and crappie in temperatures that would empty most cities. For many families, the lake shapes the entire calendar. Regattas, autumn paddles, frozen walks, and spring breakup, all unfolding from the same stretch of shoreline. Along the South Shore in Excelsior, hymns from Mount Calvary Lutheran Church drift over the water during outdoor summer services, carrying across the bays in the evening air. For many locals, the church anchors the seasons: spring confirmations, autumn suppers, and winter candlelight glowing through frosted windows. Farther south along the Minnesota River Valley, that same attachment to tradition takes on a different flavour. German brass bands, brick-built streets, and bratwurst in New Ulm. Founded largely by German immigrants, hoping to preserve the culture they left behind, the town still carries the feel of an old European settlement. Historic blocks are lined with brick storefronts, towers, and carved stone facades that give downtown an unexpectedly old-world character. One of the oldest family-owned breweries has survived wars, prohibition, and economic swings, while continuing to brew in the same valley location where its founders first fired the kettles. Back down the hill and into the town square, that same civic pride finds a quirkier, more musical voice in the spinning figurines and ringing bells of the Glockenspiel Tower. Three times a day the tower opens its panels, sends carved figures rotating on a track, and fills the square with carillon music. Each figurine tells a chapter of New Ulm's past, dressed and posed in period detail, turning a simple clock tower into a slow-spinning storybook above the sidewalk. Around the corner, stone walls and tall stained glass windows mark a different kind of landmark: the Cathedral of the Holy Trinity, where German Catholic roots are built right into the walls. Built in Romanesque style, the cathedral rises in thick stone and rounded arches, its central tower lifting cleanly above the New Ulm roofline. Locally sourced buff-coloured limestone gives the exterior a warm tone that shifts from pale daylight gold to bold amber at dusk. Two symmetrical towers frame the entrance, while deeply carved archways create a facade dense enough to hold attention even in passing. Imported stained glass from Germany fills the interior with saturated reds and golds, casting shifting pools of colour across the floor as the sun moves. Far from the carved pews and coloured glass, a different version of Minnesota waits up the road, sprawling, river-split, and unmistakably alive. And its name is Minneapolis. The skyline alone tells a story. Gothic stonework, Art Deco towers and glass skyscrapers packed into the same view, each era refusing to disappear beneath the next. Neighbourhoods feel almost self-contained, each with its own food corridors, local habits, and residents convinced their corner of the city is the best place in the state. The city holds 22 lakes, entirely within its limits, making swimming, kayaking, and fishing part of ordinary neighbourhood life. Hundreds of community garden plots spread across Minneapolis as well, making homegrown food feel surprisingly normal in the middle of a major metro area. Outside of New York City, it has one of the country's highest concentrations of theatre seats per capita, giving live performance an outsized presence in daily life. New construction often incorporates murals and large-scale installations, weaving public art directly into the city's growth. When winter drives temperatures well below freezing, residents retreat into an extensive skyway network connecting offices, restaurants, and shops above the streets. All that craftsmanship and neighbourhood pride finds its stone counterpart just blocks away, where the Basilica of St. Mary rises broad-shouldered above the city. It became the first building in the United States officially designated a basilica by the Vatican, an honour granted while Minneapolis itself was still a relatively young city. Modelled after Roman Beaux-Arts churches, the structure combines a grand portico, towering marble columns, a massive rose window, and stained glass across the interior. The dome climbs 138 feet overhead, and engineers were forced to redesign the foundation mid-construction when the original plan proved too weak to support the scale of the project. Throughout the building, 675 angels are hidden in glass, bronze, marble, plaster and wood, turning nearly every corner into another small discovery. Colour carries symbolic meaning as well. White for purity, blue for truth, red for love and gold for glory, turning the interior into a carefully coded tribute to the Virgin Mary. In 1926, Pope Pius XI granted the basilica title for the piety of its worshippers, the splendour of its ritual, and the richness of its adornment. Today, the grounds also host one of the Twin Cities' largest outdoor music festivals, where food trucks and live bands gather beside one of the city's most historic landmarks. A few blocks away, a different kind of authority takes over. Minneapolis City Hall, built in stone, topped with a clock tower, and still very much in charge. The whole structure is made from Ortonville granite, quarried right here in Minnesota, so the building is literally constructed from the same ground the city stands on. Construction took 16 years to finish, partly because the city kept running out of money, and partly because the architects simply refused to cut corners. Inside the rotunda, an 18-foot bronze statue called the Father of Waters stands on its own, carved from a single block of white marble, and still stops people cold the moment they walk in. The clock tower pushes nearly 345 feet above street level, and each of the 4 clock faces is large enough that the minute hands alone stretch over 6 feet long. For residents, this is where the city's real arguments happen. Zoning fights, council votes, public debates, inside walls that have watched it decide what it wants to be for over a century. Standing proudly in the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden, the Spoon Bridge and Cherry isn't just a sculpture, it's the garden's playful centerpiece, inviting everyone into a world of art and imagination. Created for the garden as its defining work, it turns an ordinary object into an oversized form that feels both monumental and instantly recognizable. The spoon stretches 52 feet long, weighs 7,000 pounds, and the cherry on top sprays a gentle arc of water over the pond below. It almost looked very different. A rabbit was seriously considered before the cherry won out, nearly leaving the city with a giant spoon topped by a rabbit as its landmark. Since 1988, it has become closely tied to Minneapolis identity, appearing on merchandise, postcards, and local branding as one of the city's most recognizable symbols. The surrounding garden is free to enter every day, reinforcing the idea that public art belongs to everyone rather than a select audience. Just beyond the garden's edge, the Mississippi River comes into view. Wide, unhurried, and completely indifferent to everything the city has built around it. Minneapolis sits where the river first becomes navigable by large boats, a geographic advantage that made settlement here inevitable. The Dakota called it Ha-ha-Wakp, meaning River of the Fools, and held its banks sacred long before Minneapolis existed, a history still reflected in the river's seasonal flooding and shifting course. It drains nearly 40% of North America, gathering water from 31 states and 2 Canadian provinces through a single channel cutting straight through downtown. Designated in part as a protected national park corridor, the river forms one of the few major urban gorges in the country. Today, trails line its banks where locals run, cycle, and kayak, the same corridor that once carried grain and lumber across the continent. The water now supporting recreation instead of industry. Each spring and fall, the Mississippi River becomes one of North America's busiest migration routes, guiding millions of birds along its length. The best place to take it in is the Stone Arch Bridge, a 130-year-old railroad crossing now reserved for pedestrians, offering sweeping views of both the falls and the skyline. Built to carry grain trains when Minneapolis was the flour milling capital of the world, the bridge once moved more wheat across the river than many countries produce in an entire year. No steel was used, only granite and limestone blocks fitted into 23 arches with such precision that the structure has survived 13 decades of Minnesota winters without losing a single arch. Nearly 100,000 tons of stone went into the bridge, including granite from Sauk Rapids, limestone from Iowa, and marble trim quarried in Wisconsin. Because the river changes in both depth and width, each arch was individually sized between 40 and 100 feet to support exactly the load required beneath it. After rail traffic disappeared, local residents pushed successfully to preserve the structure as a public walkway instead of tearing it down. From the Stone Arch Bridge, the route leads naturally towards St. Anthony Falls, the force that powered Minneapolis and shaped everything built around it. This is the only natural waterfall along the entire Mississippi River, a geological rarity that drew travellers from across the continent long before the city existed. The Dakota people called it Owamni, meaning the swirling waters, and treated the falls as a sacred place, tied to ceremony, mist and sound rather than industry. Settlers saw something else in the rushing water: power. Within decades, mills lined the banks and turned the falls into the centre of the world's largest wheat milling operation. Yet the waterfall is unstable. Soft limestone erodes so quickly that engineers poured a massive concrete apron beneath the falls to keep them from collapsing upstream and disappearing. Without that intervention, the industrial boom that built Minneapolis may never have lasted at all. Evidence of that milling era still stands downstream, where ruined flour mills cling to the water's edge, and Mill Ruins Park preserves the city's industrial foundation. At its peak, this riverfront produced more flour than anywhere on Earth. 1 in every 3 American loaves traced back to grain processed here, shaping the rise of the modern pantry. Water from the falls was diverted through underground mill races carved directly into bedrock, a hidden system still partially visible beneath the park today. In one infamous incident, a flour dust explosion levelled an entire city block, sending shockwaves through Minneapolis and revealing just how volatile industrial milling could become. When the industry declined, the city chose to preserve the ruins rather than erase them, leaving broken walls and exposed foundations open to the sky. That same instinct to connect past and present continues north along the river, where the Lowry Avenue Bridge spans the Mississippi in a clean modern arc, linking the industrial waterfront to growing neighbourhoods. When the design was approved, residents pushed for pedestrian lanes and public art to be built into the structure, shaping it into more than just a crossing. At night, colour lighting runs along its span, turning the bridge into a visible marker of renewal on a stretch of river once overlooked. The neighbourhoods on either side are among Minnesota's most culturally mixed. Somali restaurants, Scandinavian bakeries, and Vietnamese noodle shops within blocks. A single walk reflecting how the city has changed. The gorge visible from the bridge deck is federally protected parkland on both banks, placing the crossing above one of the most intact natural corridors in any major American city. The view from up here points south, and that's exactly where the next stop sits. Minnehaha Falls, a waterfall inside a city park that somehow manages to feel nothing like a city. Dropping 53 feet into a limestone gorge, the falls send spray up to the railing while visitors linger anyway, drawn in by water that refuses to feel manageable. During winter, the cascade freezes into a towering column of ice, holding its shape above the gorge while hikers walk through snow to stand beneath it. The park surrounding the falls is one of Minnesota's oldest public green spaces, preserved after residents in the 19th century pushed to keep the waterfall open to everyone. Beyond the falls, the journey continues northeast, where the St. Croix River cuts through Interstate State Park in black basalt and large glacial potholes, making Minnehaha look gentle by comparison. Meltwater once spun trapped boulders in tight circles here, using them like natural drill bits to carve perfectly rounded shafts straight into solid rock. Some of these potholes plunge more than 60 feet, and standing at the rim reveals smooth, curved walls that drop into unsettling depth. The park straddles Minnesota and Wisconsin, one of the earliest interstate conservation efforts in the United States, created to protect a shared stretch of geology. From here, the river system continues west toward the Mississippi Bluffs, where St. Paul rises in brick and stone as the long-established capital of Minnesota. The city nearly had a very different name. The original settlement was Pig's Eye Landing, named after a one-eyed whiskey smuggler who moved downstream after being expelled from a military fort. His cloudy left eye earned him the nickname Pig's Eye, and the name spread so widely through maps and letters that a Minnesota brewery still uses it today. Everything changed when a French priest built a chapel nearby and pushed for something more respectable, gradually replacing Pig's Eye with St. Paul, while both names briefly coexisted. Unlike many Midwestern cities built around rigid grids, St. Paul followed the natural curves of the river long before railroads imposed straighter lines elsewhere. Where Minneapolis frequently rebuilt itself, St. Paul held onto Victorian storefronts, brick streets, and older neighbourhoods that residents deliberately chose to preserve. Summit Avenue stretches nearly 5 miles and contains the country's longest continuous line of Victorian mansions, including the birthplace of the famous author F. Scott Fitzgerald. Below the bluffs, settlers carved directly into soft sandstone cliffs, creating caves later used for beer storage, shelter, and speakeasies during Prohibition in the United States. The result is a city shaped more by the land itself and habit than by strict planning, deliberate in pace, historic in character, and comfortable remaining both. That identity reaches its grandest scale uphill, where the Minnesota state capitol crowns the skyline beneath one of the world's largest self-supported domes. The dome is the world's second largest self-supporting marble dome, after St. Peter's Basilica. The designer modelled it after Rome, and the resemblance never stopped following the building. Built from white Georgia marble, the structure catches winter sunlight and reflects it across the frozen Mississippi Valley for miles. Above the entrance, 4 copper horses, gilded in gold leaf, pull a chariot forward in one of the country's largest gold-leafed sculptural groups. Maintaining that shine requires sheets of 23.5 carat gold leaf so delicate that restoration crews pause work when strong winds move in. For many locals, the capital is less a monument than a civic anchor, the dome they navigate by and the place they gather, even in winter, to argue over roads, schools, and state politics. A few blocks downhill stands its spiritual counterpart, the Cathedral of St. Paul, mother church of the Archdiocese, and a second landmark rising from the neighbouring bluff. Its copper-clad dome rises 186 feet, high enough that the interior comfortably holds thousands of people beneath it. Like the Minnesota state capitol, it draws inspiration from St. Peter's Basilica, placing two major civic and religious landmarks in the same city, shaped by the same architectural reference. Designated a national shrine, it functions as a pilgrimage site connected to the Apostle Paul as much as to its architecture. That same bluff drops to the river, where the Smith Avenue High Bridge carries traffic high above the Mississippi, letting the valley open fully on both sides. At 160 feet above the water, the crossing gives drivers an unintentional pause as the city falls away beneath them. The original bridge swayed in strong wind, leaving pedestrians feeling the skyline move, before being replaced in 1987 with a stable steel span prioritising safety over spectacle. The current design uses an inverted arch system, with the curve running beneath the roadway for a low, clean profile from the river. Not far from here, Rice Park opens between old buildings, and at its edge stands Landmark Centre, once a federal courthouse, now one of St. Paul's most repurposed addresses. Built in a Romanesque chateau-esque style, it has a steep roof, turrets, dormers, and twin towers that give it the look of a French chateau dropped into the middle of the Midwest. For decades it did exactly that, processing Prohibition-era cases that brought bootleggers and smugglers from across the upper Midwest to answer for it right here. When the federal courts moved out, the city slated it for demolition, until residents pushed back and St. Paul restored it as a cultural centre instead. The same courtrooms where criminal cases were decided now hold concert halls, galleries, and event spaces, a combination that would have baffled the original architects completely. Follow the river south and the density drops fast, replaced by wetlands, lakes, and the wide Minnesota River Valley that Bloomington has made entirely its own. The valley was carved by a glacier, leaving a gorge far wider than the river now filling it. The Minnesota River still looks slightly undersized for the space it occupies. Bloomington was a small farming community until the post-war suburban boom transformed it from cornfields and river bottomland into one of the state's most commercially dense cities, quickly. Tucked within its boundaries is the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge, nearly 70 miles of wetlands, forest, and open water cutting through one of the state's most developed corridors. Nearly a third of Bloomington's total land is parks and nature. So for every block of hotels and highways, there is an equal measure of trails, wetlands, and open sky. Bald eagles, white-tailed deer, and migratory waterfowl move through it year-round, minutes from the airport and the largest shopping mall in the country. Up the hill from the water, Bloomington offers one more surprise: the Bush Lake Ski Jump, a full competition tower rising 230 feet in the middle of the suburbs. Built in the 1930s by Norwegian immigrants who wanted to continue their jumping traditions, it was constructed inside a city park tucked behind residential streets. The facility remains one of the few active competition-grade ski jumps in the region, still used by elite and Olympic-level athletes. Each winter, jumpers climb to the top and launch themselves down the hill, while everyday suburban life continues around them. Nearby, the old Cedar Avenue Bridge stands quietly above the river, retired from vehicle traffic decades ago, but still open to pedestrians crossing on foot. Built in 1920 to carry a highway across the Minnesota River Valley, it served as a primary crossing until a newer bridge redirected traffic elsewhere. Rather than demolish it, the city converted it into a pedestrian and cycling route, and it has since become one of the most used crossings in the valley. During spring and fall migration, the wetlands fill with tens of thousands of waterfowl along the Mississippi Flyway, one of North America's major bird corridors, passing directly through suburban Bloomington. For birders, it becomes a place to linger, a crossing where people often stop halfway and stay long after they intend to move on. As evening settles over the wetlands, short-eared owls move low across the grass, circling the marsh in wide, unhurried passes. Unlike most owls, this species often hunts at dawn and dusk, moving in near silence just above the grass as it searches for subtle motion below. It locates prey primarily through hearing, using asymmetrically placed ears to detect faint rustles from voles hidden in vegetation. A facial disc, the flat, rounded shape of its face, helps funnel sound with enough precision to pinpoint movement beneath several inches of snow. Despite the name, the short ears are not ears at all, but small feather tufts, raised when the bird is alert or agitated. Unusually for an owl, it often rests directly on the ground in shallow scrapes, where its camouflage allows it to disappear into the prairie. In winter, short-eared owls sometimes hunt in loose groups, working the same open fields where vole populations remain high. When defending a nest, the adult may perform a broken wing display, dragging itself across the ground to lure predators away from its eggs. The wetlands and grasslands of Bloomington's river valley make this one of the better places in the upper Midwest to observe them. Open terrain, low light, and steady prey activity. Southeast lies Rochester, smaller than Minneapolis, calmer than St. Paul, and somehow home to one of the most visited medical institutions in the world. Its origins trace back to an 1880s tornado that overwhelmed the town, when Dr. William Mayo treated survivors wherever he could until a local nun offered to fund a hospital if he would run it. That agreement became the foundation of what is now the Mayo Clinic, the largest non-profit medical practice in the world, drawing patients from more than 130 countries. The city gradually reshaped itself around that reality. Hotels, transit systems, and underground tunnels all designed to support patients and families moving between clinics and lodging. Through it all runs the Zumbro River, winding quietly through parks and green corridors, a softer counterpoint to the intensity that defines much of the city's purpose. The river cuts through southeastern Minnesota in long, unhurried curves, flanked by limestone bluffs and forests that turn gold and amber each fall. Long before European settlement, the locals called it Wapka Wazi Oju, meaning pines planted river, referencing the white pines that once lined its banks. French voyageurs later named it Rivière des Embarras, or River of Obstructions, due to driftwood and snags that made canoe travel difficult. Over time, the name was shortened and reshaped into Zumbro, carried forward in a form easier for English speakers to pronounce. Despite its calm appearance, the river can flash flood within hours after heavy rain, rapidly transforming familiar stretches into fast-moving water. Erosion has also reshaped its course, including the loss of a small waterfall near Zumbro Falls, where only sandstone remains mark what once was a drop. The route continues west toward Mankato, where two rivers meet at the edge of the southern Minnesota Bluffs, and the city rises from the junction. Its name comes from the Dakota word makato, meaning blue earth, referring to the blue-green clay along the riverbanks that also gave the Blue Earth River its name. Steep bluffs enclose the river valley, giving the city a sheltered feel, while higher ground opens into farmland stretching in every direction toward an almost oceanic horizon. Functioning as a regional hub between rural southern Minnesota and the Twin Cities corridor, the city draws people in for schools, healthcare, shopping, and entertainment, giving it steady, outsized energy. Alexandria sits among a chain of lakes where life is often organised around shoreline access, fishing spots, ice conditions, and quiet coves, all guiding how people use the water. Downtown still holds a compact main street of brick storefronts, diners and local shops where customers are often on a first-name basis with the people behind the counter. Just beyond it, early, silk-stocking neighbourhood homes sit under mature trees, many now converted into inns and small lodgings rather than being replaced. Newer infrastructure, schools, clinics, and lakeside museums sits along the edges, keeping daily life, tourism, and local routines tightly interwoven. From this pocket of lakes and slow rhythms, the route bends southeast into steeper country, where farmland rises into bluffs above a wide sweep of the Mississippi at Frontenac State Park. Trails climb from shaded forest at the base to open overlooks along the bluff line, shifting the view with every turn. Small side paths lead into clearings where wildflowers and grasses break through the trees, adding colour between denser stands of woodland. From the edge of the bluffs, Lake Pepin stretches wide enough that boats shrink into distant shapes and the far shore fades into a thin green line. On calm days, the river mirrors the surrounding forest so completely that the trees appear to extend both upward into the sky and downward into the water. Along the riverbanks below, deer step out briefly at dusk before slipping back into cover, moving quietly between openings in the woods. In spring and fall, the Mississippi becomes a migration corridor, filled with long streams of birds moving between sandbars, forests, and open water. From the bluffs, raptors drift on rising air currents below eye level, riding the same winds that cut sharply across the ridge tops. As evening settles, pale shapes gather on the water until tundra swans rest across the lake in loose white clusters. These Arctic travellers pass through Minnesota on seasonal migration routes, using the Mississippi corridor as a resting point to recover before continuing south. They navigate long distances using a combination of stars, sun position, and major features such as rivers and shorelines. Each bird stands nearly child height, with a long white neck, black bill, and a call that carries like a clear trumpet across open water. By day, they tip forward in shallow areas, pulling up aquatic plants and roots that sustain them through the next stage of their journey. At rest, they sleep lightly, with heads tucked along their backs, ready to lift into flight in sudden bursts of heavy wing beats, if disturbed. Tundra swans often form long-term pair bonds, with mated birds travelling together across multiple migration seasons. Other waterbirds share the same feeding areas, spacing themselves around the swans' movements to avoid their size and strength. Farther out in deeper water, where plants are harder to reach, diving birds such as the canvasback take over the underwater foraging niche. It's like a small missile, with a long body, sloped head, and narrow chest. It cuts across the water and slips beneath the surface with remarkable speed. It dives repeatedly for the roots of wild celery, a favourite food that once made canvasback meat highly prized on upscale menus. Heavy hunting and habitat loss sharply reduced populations along major waterways before protections and recovering wetlands slowly helped the species rebound. Today, around Frontenac, people watch canvasbacks with a mix of admiration and restraint, aware of how quickly abundance can disappear. As the divers keep working the lower pockets of the river, the route drifts downstream toward calmer current and old brick streets in the bluff-lined river town of Stillwater. It is often called the birthplace of Minnesota, after an early territorial convention held here helped set the state's political foundation. The town grew during the lumber boom, when logs floated downriver from northern forests and local mills processed timber used across the expanding Midwest. Historic brick buildings still rise from the water's edge, with steep stairways and side streets climbing past former warehouses, and breweries now turned into shops, restaurants, and riverside gathering spaces. Its preserved Main Street draws visitors year-round, filling sidewalks with people carrying coffee, ice cream, and baskets of cheese curds while boats move slowly along the river below. daily life still follows the rhythm of the St. Croix. Quiet mornings, busy patios by afternoon, and music drifting across the water after sunset. A small trolley runs through the hills past restored mansions overlooking the valley, while public stairways lead up the bluffs to wide views across the rooftops and river. Even in winter, lights glow along the streets, and people continue gathering downtown, despite the cold, trading summer crowds for quieter evenings and steaming drinks. One last turn downhill, and Stillwater meets the St. Croix River, where the water slides beneath the old lift bridge beside the lawns and walking paths of Lowell Park. In summer, the broad channel fills with kayaks, pontoons, paddleboards and tour boats moving steadily through the calm bend below town. Families spread blankets across the grass with pizza boxes, fried walleye, and melting ice cream, while children wander toward the shoreline. Locals speak of river days, less as planned outings than as a habit. Hours spent near the water listening to gulls, distant engines and music drifting from the park. Long before recreational traffic arrived, the St. Croix served as a logging highway, carrying massive timber rafts downstream toward the region's sawmills. Today, much of the river remains federally protected under the National Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, preserving long stretches of undeveloped shoreline and healthy habitat. Beneath the surface live rare freshwater mussels, while exposed sandstone and limestone cliffs reveal layers of long-buried seafloors along the valley walls. Spring snowmelt can quickly transform the river, raising water levels and accelerating the current until the same calm route becomes fast, brown, and turbulent. During winter, steam rises from the open water into freezing air as bald eagles gather in bare riverside trees, watching for fish near the edges of the ice. By evening, the river darkens, and every passing wake catches the remaining light in long rippling lines beneath the bridge arches. Standing directly in that frame, linking town and water in a single view, is the Stillwater lift bridge. This green steel vertical lift bridge raises its centre span for tall boats, using a system of counterweights and cables that has operated for generations. For decades, it carried all vehicle traffic across the St. Croix and funneled cars directly through downtown until a modern bridge nearby replaced it. Rather than demolish the structure, residents pushed to preserve it as part of Stillwater's identity, and the crossing was eventually converted for pedestrians and cyclists. Today, visitors wander across with coffee in hand, stopping midway to look over brick storefronts on one side and wooded riverbanks on the other. When taller sailboats approach, gates close and the centre section slowly rises above the channel, briefly turning the riverfront into an audience for the bridge itself. The structure remains one of the few surviving vertical lift highway bridges of its era still standing in the country. With the span back in place, the route follows the river downstream to shifting channels and an abandoned bend now sitting quietly as an oxbow lake. It forms when a river loop gradually widens, cuts a shorter channel through softer ground, and abandons its older curve in favour of a straighter path. Over time, the cut-off bend slows and fills in. Sediment settles, vegetation spreads, and what was once moving water becomes a still crescent-shaped pool. Sheltered in low ground beneath cottonwoods and willows, these lakes attract herons, turtles, frogs, and fish that prefer quiet water over fast current. In Minnesota, families often treat them as quiet local spots for early fishing, first canoe trips, and long afternoons in camp chairs away from the main river traffic. For many who grew up near them, oxbows are remembered as forgiving water, shallow paddling, drifting reflections, and sound carried softly through trees. Across the southern half of the state, the land does one thing: it grows corn. By late summer, fields stretch in dense green rows across the lowlands, broken only by gravel roads and scattered farmsteads. Much of this crop is not destined for dinner tables, but processed into animal feed and ethanol, moving from rural fields into fuel systems and supply chains. The agricultural year follows a steady rhythm: planting in spring, months of growth through summer, and intensive harvest in fall, when combining work from sunrise late into the night. People who grow up here often recognise the seasons through sound and texture: grain dryers humming after dark, trucks on dust-covered roads, and the scent of cut fields in the air. Alongside large-scale production, corn remains part of local food culture, appearing in roadside stands, church meals, and county fairs, where fresh ears are still treated as a seasonal staple. Above the fields, rows of wind turbines now turn slowly in the prairie air, sharing the same open horizons that have long shaped the region's agricultural life. They stand along high ground like Buffalo Ridge, where steady winds move across the ridgeline so consistently that the towers seem to hum through the night, while the fields below remain still. From a distance, the turbines form a long line across the horizon. Up close, each blade stretches longer than a jet wing and moves with a low sound that carries through the open land. Farmers here now work with both soil and sky, earning income from crops and from wind energy that feeds power into towns spread across the region. For many families, this shift feels like a continuation rather than a change, another chapter in a long pattern of adapting daily life to wind, weather, and open land. Together, fields and turbines define the same terrain, where movement above and growth below share the same wide prairie space. This is Minnesota, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of Montana, check out this video.